to welcome all of you to March With session and introduce our speaker. And it's such a special month for the International Women's Month. Welcome everyone. Jo Miller is dedicated to helping women around the world become the powerhouse leaders that they were meant to be. She delivers more than 70 presentations globally every year and has spoken in Europe, North America, Latin America, Asia Pacific, and the Middle East. Her book, which is titled Women of Influence, 9 Steps to Build Your Brand, Establish Your Legacy, and Thrive, was published by McGraw-Hill in December. It was a #1 best-selling new release on Amazon and has sold over 6,000 copies. I want to take a moment to ask all of you to look under your chairs. If you find a little piece of paper, you're going to get a book signed by Jo. Yay! I told you I wasn't hurting anyone. And we'll be sending some books to Latin America. Today, she will inspire you to shift your mindset from doing to leading. Also share important life lesson learned from a puppy. Last November, Jo celebrated 3 years free from breast cancer. Jo believes that when life hands you lemons, you should stuff them in your bra and sing, ta-da! Please give a warm welcome to Jo Miller.
Thanks for that lovely introduction. And wow, I mean, I've never seen a group so excited. Someone said it's a little like being on Oprah, isn't it? So, wow, so well, thanks for getting everyone so excited before I come up to speak. And look, before we do anything, could we put our hands together for Circle and the Cisco Red Team and everyone And I also want to thank you for doing something that we don't do nearly enough, which is that you're here. You've left aside everything you have going on to invest this time in yourself and your career and leadership development, and we don't do that enough, do we? So could you do this? This is going to seem cheesy. Just trust me on this. Could you all raise your right hand and drop it down behind your shoulders? Just give yourself a pat on the back. Thank you. So I know as soon as I open my mouth and start to speak, many of you have a question, don't you? You're wondering, where is her accent from? Yes. So, because I'm always curious, could we see by a show of hands here in the room, and if you're joining via WebEx, if this applies to you, just type the word yes into the chat. Raise your hand or type yes in the chat if you're living and working in a place which is not where you grew up. Raise your hand. Look around the room, the majority of us. Thank you. Next question. Raise your hand or type me into the chat. Raise your hand or type me into the chat if you're living and working in a country which is not where you grew up. Again, a majority of us. And so my story was similar. I actually grew up in Australia and then lived here in the Bay Area in California for 10 years and then relocated to Cedar Rapids in Iowa with my husband's career. So my journey's been Australia, California, Iowa. So the accent you hear, it's Australifornia, Iowan. So as the only Australian women's leadership speaker and expert in the state of Iowa, I consider that I have some unique qualifications to share with you. So in case anyone was wondering, I'm totally qualified. So the foundation of my book, Women of Influence, really began with a conversation I had years ago with a woman who said, I feel like I'm the invisible employee. I feel like I'm the best kept secret in this large organization that I'm a part of. And maybe some of you can relate to that feeling. She'd become indispensable for doing work that downplays her potential. And being indispensable in your current role, unfortunately, that won't move your career forward. So she and I decided to attack the problem, and we looked at all of the raw leadership strengths she had that were going unrecognized and under-leveraged. And she looked for ways to shift her mindset and behavior from doing to leading, at every opportunity, and she started to build a personal brand around her own unique leadership strengths. And as she took those steps, people around her saw the shift. They started to sit up and pay attention and see the leader in her. And even perhaps more importantly, she began to really see the leader in herself. And just because I'm always curious, I wonder if I could see by a show of hands, or again, type yes into the chat, who here has ever felt like this? Have you ever felt at any moment in your career like you were the best kept secret in the organisation? Was that ever you? Don't be shy, be courageous, raise your hand up high, thank you, or type yes into the chat. And look, if you're here in the room or another room with a group and you're sitting next to your colleagues or your boss or even your boss's boss, would you just blink your eyes twice for me? We can all relate, right? We've all felt like the best kept secret in the organisation. So one other foundation of the book is a set of 12 critical career missteps that even the most savvy and streetwise and seasoned leaders make, missteps that hold us back from advancing to the level of really using our full career and leadership potential. And those of you who get the book can flip to page 209 where they're all listed after we're done. But today I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive onto misstep number 6, because misstep number 6 is acting like a doer when you could be acting like a leader. So it's don't be a doer when you could be a leader. And for each misstep, there is an antidote to it, a leaderly move, a more leaderly step to take instead. And in this case, it's shifting your mindset from doing to leading. So in our time together, probably the first 20 to 25 minutes, I'm going to do a little more of a drill down into some of the 5 critical shifts that I learned about when I interviewed hundreds of very successful women leaders that form the foundation of the stories and the quotes you'll find in the book. But the headline I want you to remember is, don't become indispensable for doing the type of work that downplays your potential, right? Don't become indispensable for work that undersells your true value and all that you're capable of. Now, before I share the 5 shifts in mindset and behavior to move from doing to leading, I want to share one of my favorite leadership videos with you. So this video is called The World's Worst Sheepdog. The World's Worst Sheepdog. Can anyone in the group tell us, like, what is a sheepdog? What does a sheepdog do?
They herd their sheep, and usually it's from the guidance of the sheep master.
Yeah. Right. So they're incredibly hardworking, very intelligent dogs that herd the flock of sheep from point A to point B, to safety, to food, and they partner closely with the farmer in order to lead the sheep wherever they need to go. Now, this little dog is called Nelson, and the video he's in is titled The World's Worst Sheepdog. And in fact, when I first saw this on social media, someone said, this is what happens when you lie on your resume about having previous experience as a sheepdog. And I'll apologize, the video comes across a little choppy, but I think you get the idea here. All right, you get the idea. Now, it's a little hard to make out his facial expression, but just have a guess as to what that might be. So why do you think I've called this my favorite leadership video? Feel free to call out your answer and I'll repeat it for those listening in. So why do you think this is my favorite leadership video?
Because they're following the dog, the leader?
That's right, they're following. So he's not necessarily acting like we would expect a sheepdog to act. And so I would propose that instead of being the world's worst sheepdog, he's possibly one of the best, because he's being the type of leader that others want to follow. So he's disrupting and innovating and redefining what we expect from a sheepdog. He doesn't look like the sheepdogs that have come before, but he sure as heck is getting the job done. And I think he has what it takes to be a remarkable leader if he can only figure out where he really wants to go. So my point in sharing this video with you is that there will be times when you bring leadership strengths and a unique signature style of leadership that is different to those that have gone before you in your organization and different to those you see around you. But please be unafraid to step up and lead authentically in your own unique style. Don't be afraid to disrupt and redefine what leadership looks like in your organization. And really it's about you do you, own your leadership strengths. And one of the leaders that I interviewed for my book is Dr. Rohini Anand, and she's the Chief Diversity Officer with Sodexo. And she said, be authentic about your own leadership style. Don't fight to change it, but own it and communicate it and put a value on it and build a personal brand around it. So look, if you're early on in your career and you're thinking, hey, I'm not really a leader yet, let me challenge that thinking, because we all are leaders at any moment in our career whenever we choose to be. And a little bit later in our time together, I'm going to share a link where you can download a form from the book of 100 different leadership characteristics that you can use as a checklist to kind of define what are your top 3, say. So to really understand what are your unique leadership strengths, your signature style at any time in your career. So I'll share that resource with you a bit later in our time together. But look, one of the most eye-opening pieces of research I came across when I was researching for the book is this idea that authentic leaders have followers. Remember that, tattoo it on your brain. Authentic leaders have happier followers, because I think a bit like Nelson, when people can see that we're enthusiastic and authentic, that becomes infectious and people want to join us. They want to collaborate and work with us. All right, so I promised that we'd talk about 5 key shifts in mindset and behavior that will take you from doing to leading. And this is super important because to have gotten to where you are in your career today, you will have relied on and built a certain set of skills and competencies that have been instrumental in getting you to this point. The problem is, those might not be the skills to take you to your next leadership level. In fact, if you continue to hold on to those success factors, you might actually derail yourself in some ways. And so that shift from doing to leading can be one of the toughest shifts that we do in our career, because it means letting go of so many success factors we've relied on. But as someone once said, what got you here might not get you there. And so as I go through these 5 key pivots in mindset and behavior, listen out for if there's one in particular that especially resonates for you and might be the one for you to focus on. And those of you who've gotten the book will be able to drill down a whole lot more with examples and stories and exercises in chapter 5 in the book. All right, so ready for the first shift? Here it comes. It's called going from tactician to strategist. Tactician to strategist. And look, I know most of us at some point in our career have received feedback like this. Someone said, you need to be more strategic. You delivered a presentation and someone said, great job, but I'd like to see you be more strategic in future. Or maybe you were sitting with your manager at your performance review and they said, it's time for you to be more strategic. Okay, but what does that really mean? And how do you go from acting tactically and reactively to thinking and operating strategically? And is that even possible when you don't have people to report to you? Well, in search of answers to those questions, I interviewed a couple remarkable strategic leaders, and one of them is Ellie Humphrey. And when she and I spoke, she was the Vice President of Global Strategy with Medtronic. And her role was to travel the world working with Medtronic's top leadership team to formulate and implement their strategy. So I remember asking Ellie, could you define what it means to be strategic? Like, what is strategy anyway? And I just love her answer. She said, strategy is just a fancy word for coming up with a long-term plan and putting it into action. Do you like that?
Yeah.
Strategy, just a fancy word for coming up with a long-term plan and putting it into action. And I love that some of you are taking screenshots. That's great. And so what that means is if you are looking to the future, thinking futuristically, envisioning an end result or coming up with a goal and creating that plan, those milestones to get there and making movement, positive progress toward that vision, then that's it. You are operating strategically. You are being a strategist. Another of the very inspiring women leaders that I spoke with is Donna Munsch. And when we first spoke, she was the VP of Cloud Operations at NetApp. And she told me a story about how early on in her career, she was not the strategist that she is today. She said she was the ultimate tactician. And so no one could check items off a to-do list like Donna. She would come to work every day in her role as a project administrator and take out that task list and just crush it. And it's because she was really inspired by her role model, her father, and the work ethic that he brought during the course of her career. And yet, there came a time when Donna spotted a higher level job opening that she wanted to move into. She applied and was knocked back and told, "We can't promote you. You're too valuable where you are. We can figure out how to replace you." So that was her big aha moment. And so she started to look for ways every day to shift her mindset and behavior from being that ultimate tactician to being more of a strategist. And as she did that, people started to see more of the leader emerge in her. And her career progressed. She went from being a solo performer to managing teams, then teams of teams, and became known as the strategist. That became her personal brand. And then ultimately she moved beyond that to lead very large organizations where she was known as the enabler, that leader who paints the vision but enables others with everything they need in order to make that vision a reality, the skills, the resources to get the job done. So her personal brand evolution was from ultimate tactician to strategist and ultimately to becoming an enabler. And just because I'm always so interested in how do people really make shifts like that, I asked Donna for one of her top tips, and here it is. And if you like this, I really encourage you to make note of this exercise and do it in your own time. And it's called your time portfolio, and it means choosing a month on your calendar in the past and going back over that month and color coding your activities. One color for the strategic stuff and a different color for the tactical activities. So, where are you looking toward the longer term vision and future? Where are you having that plan and checking off the milestones versus where are you very tactically looking at the things to be done right there in front of you, that task-oriented tactician way of thinking. So if you like the exercise, consider taking it on. Grab your calendar, look for a month in the past, color code, strategic activities one color, the tactical another way, and then just step back and ask yourself, what themes am I noticing? What do I see that I could do more of to be more strategic, and what might I let go of because it's much more tactical? Do you like the idea of that? I highly recommend it, and I know we really don't have time for you to do that right now, but I want you to think about, imagine you'd done that activity. What might you see in terms of some tactical activities you'd like to let go of? And what might be some more strategic activities you'd like to do more of? See if you can come up with one or two examples of each. And I'll give you about 30 seconds now, everyone in the room and those listening in, just to think through one or two answers to each question. What are some tactical activities you could let go of? And what are some more strategic activities you could do instead? I'll give you 30 seconds to think it through. All right, your time starts now. Okay, who feels like they needed more time? Like another year, for example. Those of you joining via WebEx, would you go to the chat, open up the chat, and type in an example? Maybe a tactical activity you'll let go of, put a slash, and then the strategic you'll do instead. But those of you in the room, you have 1 minute now to turn to one or two people sitting nearest you and share some examples. So 1 minute to get into groups of either 2 or 3 and do a very quick go round. Your time starts now.
You guys What was the tactical I missed it? I was sleeping.
I think the tactical is like more like single, like performing, but like strategic is more like long-term leadership maybe. But foundation. I exactly sure what I'm but like, I already tried moving it around. I don't know. My friend said she's not that age.
I know.
Everything is tactical. I feel like that's because I just started a new team, and I'm not ready for
Yes, I got one response. So I got multiple basically. So the response is train my teammates on some of my daily processes in order to pursue more passion projects.
I love it. So working to collaborate on the day-to-day to pursue those passion projects. That's something that's nice. All right, we see heads nodding, that's great. Maybe one more person. What did you notice you might do less of or do more of? Do we have a volunteer in the room willing to share? Yes, and can we get a mic out to you so we don't, so that those joining virtually can hear? Thank you.
So one of my tactical example that I have is doing less of the PR that I'm doing every week, and then more of the strategic action is managing the projects that we're qualifying the machines from our contract manufacturing, so it moves forward a lot smoother.
I love it. Thank you. Thanks. And look, if you like the exercise, everyone, take a little time sometime in the next week to do this for yourself and look for where you can make those shifts. I also became aware of 3 questions that strategic leaders ask themselves through my interviews with strategic leaders. And as I share the 3, listen out for which one you might want to work on. The first question to ask yourself on perhaps a daily or a weekly basis is, what's my time horizon? What's my time horizon? Because if you come to work every day thinking, what do I need to get done this week or this day or even this hour, you're focused on what's right in front of you. You're probably being more tactical. But if you're thinking what needs to be done this year or 2 or 3 or 5 years from today, notice how you're thinking more strategically. So the first question is, what's my time horizon? Next up, what's the scope of my influence? If you are working primarily with people who are peers in your team, who report to the same manager as you, then you're probably being more tactical. But if you're influencing with and collaborating with people across teams or across the entire organization, you're probably being more strategic. So ask yourself, what's the scope of my influence? Who am I influencing with every day? Is it a closely held group or a much wider set? And the final question is, what's the extent of change I'm driving? What's the extent of change I'm driving? Are you working on things that largely support the status quo, or are you causing more sweeping transformational change, right? Because if you're chipping away at tasks that don't change the status quo, you're being a tactician. But if you're thinking about how to cause wide-scale change, then you're being more of a strategist. As Donna Munsch said to me, even your body language can tell if you're being a tactician or a strategist, because when you're sharing your strategy, your arms should be open wide like you're conducting an orchestra. You can't do that with T-Rex arms. So don't be a tactical T-Rex, be a strategosaurus. So think about the 3 questions and pick one that'll be yours to focus on. What's my time horizon? What's the scope of my influence? And what's the extent of change I'm driving? Pick one that you'll ask yourself on a regular basis to shift your mindset from tactician to strategist. And then there's one final tip I heard again and again from the strategic leaders that I spoke with. I think you might like this one. It's give yourself time just to think. Carve out dedicated, unstructured time just to think or brainstorm or innovate or be creative. But give yourself the gift of time just to think. So we're looking at key shifts to take in your career. By the way, that checklist of 100 leadership qualities, as well as my slides and some additional resources, are available if you'd like to stay in touch with me via my newsletter. And so you may send a text message to 33777 and write the word Miller Joe, my last name and first name, if you'd like to stay in touch via my newsletter. Here's the privacy policy there. But I'll also make sure you get that link to the slides and those additional resources that will help you identify your leadership strengths and style. All right, so 33777 and Joe Miller. Okay, great. So we're looking at the 5 key shifts to move from doing to leading, and today I've drilled down into tactician to strategist. I'll give you a super high-level overview of the others so that those of you who've got the book know what to look for. But just to give the rest of you a taste for some of the other key shifts that leaders make as they grow and shift from doing to leading. So after tactician to strategist, of course, there's doing to delegating. Doing to delegating. Because successful leaders don't do it all. They don't even try. And from this point forward, the things that you say no to or hand off can define you even more as a leader than the things you hang on to and say yes to. Leadership is not about doing more, it's about shifting from doing to leading. So there's a wonderful story in the book from Alice Catwan with Salesforce. They actually did a fireside chat with in San Francisco on Monday, but a pretty dramatic story about how working as hard as she did as a new leader literally made her sick. And she was sitting in a hospital bed with an IV in her arm when her doctor said, you need to do less or you won't be here with your family to enjoy the results of all of your success. So she realized, firstly, enlisting support is crucial to my career success, and she had to admit there were things that she just had to let go of. So if you're starting out in your leadership journey, look for tasks that you can share with colleagues or what you might be able to enlist support with in your life outside work. If you're further along in your leadership journey, do what I call develegating. Do you like that word? Develegate. Developmentally delegate. Don't just hand off tasks, but invest the time to train people and help them develop in line with their aspirations, even as you're handing off that task or project or process that you'd like to delegate. So doing to delegating is the next key shift. Next up, I love this one, optimizer to transformer. And I know some of you are wondering, what's wrong with being an optimizer? Well, here's the deal. Early on in our careers, with a high performance mentality, we tend to optimize the heck out of every project or role or task or process we're given. but we're really just supporting the status quo. We're making things as efficient and productive as they can be. At some point, if you want to expand your leadership impact, shift from being that optimizer to being a transformer, leading the type of transformational change that can't be easily undone. And look, the change you lead, the problem you solve doesn't have to be big, it just needs to be important and be a change that can't be easily undone. And in the book, I interviewed Layla Pourhashemi from PayPal about how she led a remarkable transformation initiative with no positional power and a very small team. But the qualities that she used are ones that anyone can use. All right, so next up, we're looking from order taker to rule breaker and risk taker, because early on in your career, you'll earn points by doing what your boss tells you, being a good soldier, and never moving beyond the bounds of your job description. But your scope of impact will always be limited unless you start to become more of a rule breaker and a risk taker. As Nora Denzel, who's on the board of AMD and Ericsson, likes to say, if you don't take risks, you'll always work for someone that does. So think about moving from order taker to rule breaker. And I also share in the book 3 rules for rule breakers to know when to break the rules or when to play it safe. But the grandmother of them all is this final shift, shifting from me to we. Because early on in our careers, we're so concerned with our own performance and our own development and our own success. We strive to have the best idea, maybe even try to be the smartest in the room, right? But your scope of impact as a leader will be limited unless you shift your mindset from my success to the team or the organization's success. No longer striving to be the smartest in the room, but being someone whose presence lifts the productivity and collective intelligence of all those around you. You're a catalyst for high performance. So no longer wanting to be the smartest in the room, but being someone who makes the room smarter. One of my favorite leaders, Pam Stewart, summed it up so nicely when she said, when you move your mindset from me to we, everything changes. If you aspire to lead boldly and courageously, this is the most powerful shift you can make. This is the grandmother of them all. So with that, I'm going to put the summary up. While Circle joins me out here at the front, would you just turn to those sitting nearest you and share which one of these stands out for you as most important for you in the next year? If you're joining via WebEx, go ahead and type your answer into the chat and tell us why. So which one and why, and we'll just give you a super quick 30 seconds to debrief on that. Go.
I can go take this.
Right, everyone.
While we're wrapping up that conversation, I just wanted to let you know that we have a big group in Mexico, and I want to give them a big shout out. Let's see if you can see them on the screen, I'm not really sure.
I obviously want to get my existing job, but I want to go into these areas as well. I think they're for your long-term career goals. And then
I know
things
they
open up, your boss knows that, hey,
Okay. Is that them
she's
up on
really
screen?
Yes, I think so. Hey guys in Mexico, so good to see you. Thank you for joining. I think
about what they want to watch.
And everyone on WebEx, thank you so much for joining us online. I know it's not always easy.
We're grateful for you. So, Paul, you have achieved some remarkable things in your career as a leader at all levels. Yes. She's amazing. And so, as you think back to early on in your career, what were some key lessons you learned early on about shifting from doing to leading?
Early in my career, I think there were quite a few people around me who recognized the leadership skills I had and tried to give me more opportunities, but I have to admit that I did not take them early on. I was very concerned about my own ability. As someone who's coming from a different country, has a different way of thinking things, I thought that I should wait until I fit in perfectly. I want to give a very good example. I was a brand new network engineer, and I was actually an operator, not even an engineer back then, answering the phones, troubleshooting problems. I noticed that there was a problem between the three partners running the network, MCI, IBM, and University of Michigan, and I proposed that we organize a meeting to talk about the problems. And we did. They listened to me, they made this meeting, and then I got a recognition award for that. And that was, I think, a big clue that I had aspirations to work cross-functionally. But one of the engineers who I was looking up to told me that it was great that I got that award, but it wasn't that big of a deal.
Oh.
And as an engineer, you take that to heart. And I think that set me back for at least 5 years for taking it. But there were a lot of people around me who encouraged me to voice my ideas, take initiative, and they had recognized the leadership skills in me before I did.
Oh, I have so many feels from that story. And I wonder, and I'm just going to speculate here, if your early on experience fed into you being someone who is so ready to recognize and support others and lift others up rather than, push them down.
Absolutely. I always feel that each and every one of us have something unique to bring to the table, and it's only something you can bring because no one else can have the experience and thought process you have. The question is, how do we make space for that, and how do you make your own space? How do you elevate yourself? I find that a lot of times we are our worst critics around that. I know I am.
Yeah, we are. I'm reminded of something one of the women interviewed in the book said, if someone sees the leader in you, don't let that person down. Learn to see the leader in yourself. Sometimes it's hard to see what others see. And so, hey, congrats on your new recent role.
Thank you.
Moving now into a director role, and so I guess you're at it again, shifting from director.
I figured I can't just talk the talk, I gotta walk the walk. I encourage everyone to take up more management roles. We have this allergic reaction to management in general. But I think we need to change that mindset because if we are not managing, somebody else is managing us. And I don't know how long you want to do that. I wanted to step up and really bring the positive feelings that I have into my work, into my team, and take the responsibility. So it's been amazing to step up to this role since January. So I'm very excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so now, as you shift into this new role, what are some new ways that you're moving from doing to leading?
There are so many transitions that I'm going through right now, and even during this presentation, I took a screenshot of the, moving from tactical to strategic and sent it to my boss and said, "Can you help me with my calendar?" So I'm trying to figure out what to focus on because as an engineer in me, I always want to be the one doing and making sure that we are results oriented. But I think what's more important is that our teams working cross-functionally, we want to build the foundation for working like that together. So I'm really working hard to understand what we need in long term, what partnerships I need to establish to reach that goal. 'Cause. 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 '
A great, great woman leader once said, there's a lot you can accomplish by yourself, but if you want to do bigger things, it's going to take a community. Oh, and she's sitting right next to me. So, you know, one of the things we talked about, you know, when I was getting your contribution for the book, and by the way, I think you're on page 144 for anyone who wants to look it up. So it's about amplifying your accomplishments and not being the best kept secret, and so it's about promoting one's expertise and achievements, and so you taught me that one way to do that is to galvanize a community around a cause that you care deeply about. And so how did starting the Cisco Women in Tech community help you develop as a leader?
I sometimes feel guilty that I take much more out of these sessions than all of you personally, but you know, before I started WIT, I couldn't even schedule or arrange a dinner party at my house. It would give me anxiety to invite 10 people. But look where we are now. Every month we have 100, 200 people attending. So I've learned a lot through the process. There were two things that really motivated me to start these sessions. Number one was I was in a C-suite department now in the Chief Technology and Architecture Office, so I had visibility into things that I've always wished as an engineer that I did, and I wanted to bring that vision and clarity to everyone that I know who's working very hard. So that was one reason. The second reason is, as a person, I always believe that a healthy community is what makes life a really better place. And we always want a healthy community, but I wanted to add my contribution to that. I wanted to start my own community. So the result is that 6.5 years we've been coming together and get to know each other. And I've learned a lot from all of you through the interactions about the issues, you know, what the career goals we all have. There's been a tremendous amount of learning for me. This program also gives me a lot of visibility into the, I have gained visibility into the eyes of the leaders by starting this community. Last week actually, we had Maria Martinez as a speaker, who is the EVP for customer success. And you know, I think Maria knows my name now because I have held this session. So there is a lot I get from these sessions, probably as much as I give, maybe even more sometimes.
I can't believe it's been only 6.5 years and all this has grown
Correct.
in that time. Isn't that a remarkable global community?
And I want to remind everyone that Joe Miller was actually our second speaker ever in 2013.
Oh.
Yes.
I think even I had forgotten about that.
Until I pulled up a picture and showed to Joe.
It's photographic evidence.
That's right.
Knows that, Sue.
Yes. So Joe, I would like to ask a few questions before we open up to the audience. So you have been a pioneer in women's leadership. You know, you've been speaking about this topic, sharing your expertise for a long time. Why did you write this book? And also, there are a lot of leadership books. What's different about this one?
I'll talk about what's different about this one first. So I am an avid reader of leadership books myself, as you can probably imagine, and so is my mother-in-law, to the extent that she has a leadership library in her home. And whenever I visit, I pull a book and read through. And I remember so clearly one day, I'm reading this book, and it's got all these examples of great leaders. And the first one was a man, the second one was a man. And at the third, I started counting, and when we got to number 11, with all these male examples of great leaders, number 11 was a cautionary tale of what not to do. And you guessed it, it was a woman. And I remember picking the book up and throwing it across the room and going, oh no, it's not my room, it's not my book. But I started to have that experience quite a lot, and my husband and my cat just learned to duck whenever I got that look in my eye. So for me, having met and interviewed so many incredible women leaders, I wanted to write a leadership book and about career advancement and influencing that featured women's stories and examples and quotes and tips, and I think all the skills are equally applicable no matter what gender you identify with, but the stories all come from women. That was so important to me. And then I think you asked why now? You know, it's such an interesting time. So with the Me Too movement and women's marches and office walkouts, women are speaking up in record numbers, aren't we? We're finding our voice. And organizations, some, like this one, are really listening and paying attention and creating change. And some others are starting to listen. And yet, with all that change, I still see women who feel stuck and don't know how to advance in their careers. And so I thought, it seems like the moment is now. We're taking our seat at the table, taking up space, finding our voices. Like, let's use these tools to keep elevating ourselves, and not just do that, lift others up as well.
Thank you so much for doing that. It's so helpful. What was the most eye-opening discovery you came across during your research for this book?
Ooh, there was a couple. I'll share one that's brief, and I think I mentioned it. It's this idea that authentic leaders have happier followers. It's, you know, there's all these data and statistics, and I just find that one so joyful, right? Authentic leaders have happier followers. It just, I don't know, it feels good to know, doesn't it? It's like permission just to kind of show up and own your strengths and be who you are, knowing that's a great leadership tool right there.
That's wonderful. And what's the biggest takeaway, the one most important step you hope every woman will take after reading the book?
Women, men, whatever gender you identify with, I think this idea that we often feel like the best kept secret or the invisible one, and we end up in roles where somehow we become indispensable for doing the type of work that's less than what we're capable of. We kind of downplay all that we're able to do, and I think if people walk away seeing the leader in themselves, knowing their leadership strengths, finding ways to make an impact, do the passion project, solve the big endemic business problem, or galvanize a team or a community, make your impact, and then showcase the results, amplify your accomplishments. I think that's it. Just don't be the best kept secret. And if there was one more, keep lifting each other up.
That sounds wonderful. We have about 12 minutes, and I would like to open up for questions.
Thank you. I really like this page, but I'm also an engineer working in a group. My question is, do you think everyone should be strategist and delegate and transformer, and the work won't get done? So is it about a tactician? Is it I'm downplaying my strength, or is it some asset that any team should have?
I certainly have thoughts, but I'd love to hear from you too, because you've come from such a technical background. Do you have an answer?
My answer is that if you are a good tactician and you're doing a great job, I think you will want to do more. And as soon as you want to do more, you're going to have to step out of that and do it in a different way. So I think it's a natural transition, unless.
I love that. Thank you. Thanks. And my perspective is, yes, everyone has tactical stuff to do, not only at work and at home, and yet, there's this mantra that I love. It's amplify the accomplishments that align with your aspirations. Amplify the accomplishments that align with your aspirations. And yes, we all have tasks that we cannot offload that need to be done, but still try to reach for and prioritize the bigger picture, more strategic, big impact stuff, so that you've got something to show your higher level capabilities. And when you achieve something noteworthy, don't be shy about promoting its value, educating others about what you know and do. But you're right, the tactical stuff never goes away, but let's strive to do more of and showcase the bigger picture stuff. Does that help?
Sure, I like the fact that you said prioritize bigger picture first, that even for technicians you have to do that.
just want to add one other thing. In my own experience, what you think is tactical today changes, or what you view as strategic today changes. I want to give you an example from this group. So originally I was doing everything by myself almost. And then I thought to myself, I'm tired of doing but never writing down the little pieces. So I started writing them down. So what was tactical was doing. I switched to writing so that maybe someone can pick up one. Now I'm looking into how do I make it so that the event can run even when I'm not around. So what was strategic back then, which was writing things down, is now a tactical thing for me.
Wow, that's brilliant. And as you do that, you can see trends and ways to maybe automate a task or a process, or do a skills trade with someone for whom that's a strength, and you help them with something for which it's a strength of yours. Great, who's next?
No question.
And my question is, sometimes some functions require you to be a hands-on manager, right? And in that case, how do you prioritize you being hands-on versus managing?
I've been contemplating that myself at the moment. I think it has to do with how much can you delegate and who you delegate to. You have to be hands-on if you're not trusting the people. Like, you want to have really good insights, so you're hands-on. But if you can rely on someone to give you those insights, you may be able to stay away from some of it. But I understand your worry, like how much can I depend on the insights given to me by somebody else? But if you think about it, at some point you have to let go and start operating where you are relying on somebody else's insight, which may not be as perfect as you are, but it's still a progress. So that's how I'm looking at it at the moment.
I'm learning so much. I'll share something too. Remember the video of the dog and the sheep are kind of running around in circles here and there, and they're putting all this effort in. If the dog would just say, here's the direction where we're going, here's our goal, we're going to get through that gate, everyone would put the same effort in, but they'd move a lot further. And so, yes, you could be a hands-on doing the work manager, but the more you can share the vision and the strategy with people, you and the team will go further, even as you're all pitching in hands-on and doing the work.
There are a couple of questions on WebEx.
We'll take one there and then.
So the first question is, not everyone aspires to be in management. Any tips on how to be a leader from your current position without formally being in a people lead role?
Yes, I thought about this a lot. Early on in my career, I so wanted to be a leader, but it was incredibly clear to everyone, maybe I was the last one to know, I am not a people leader. I am still not a people leader. And so it was deflating for me to think that people leader was the only type of leader. Now, 2 decades later, I realize that there's more than one type of leader, and you just need to figure out which type you are. There's a change leader and a people leader and a service leader and a results leader and a thought leader. And the more you can pinpoint and identify your own leadership style, it's very freeing. And when you know your style, then you get to partner with people that have the other strengths.
And I think you had a really great webinar on thought leadership that I had participated. Yeah, I wanted to add to that. If you are feeling passionate about something, and it could be at work, like some code, I don't know, some design, you can be a leader, advocating for that, discussing that in the groups that you are in. That's also a type of leadership. At Cisco, we have technical leadership and people leadership roles, and there's a reason for that. Not everybody has to be people leader. That's a different type of job then. You can be a leader, doesn't have to be people leader.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. I'm so delighted to be here. In terms of the shift list, I see I want these 5. I want all of them because but when I think about it, in terms of data, how long does it take for a person to go from the left side to the right side and get all of these? Not just one strategist, but I want to be the we, I want to be the rule breaker. So that's something I want to know.
This might come as bad news. And I would challenge those of you, of anyone who is in a formal leadership role in the room, do you ever get to the other side, the destination? Are you always kind of working on and tweaking and shifting? And look, give yourself the gift of focus and just pick one. And if you don't know, share this list with people that know you well, your mentor, best friend at work, manager. Pick one and just go to town on it, and you'll know when you feel you've made progress and it's ready to kind of work on a different bucket.
I just want to add something very quickly. I find in my experience that we are our worst critic, and we don't like it when there is a lot of uncertainty around things. So if you don't have all of those 5, maybe you should wait till all of them are there. But I would challenge you to think about it as a process, as a journey. You start somewhere, it will make you uncomfortable, but if you keep doing it, you'll feel comfortable with it. You don't have to wait till everything feels right, and it's okay.
Can we take one more?
One more?
Yeah, one more from WebEx. Most leaders get a chance to lead when a sponsor gives them an opportunity to do so. What are your thoughts on finding a sponsor when you are moving to be more strategic and rule breaking?
So I think it starts with understanding the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, because typically we think about mentors, and mentors are wonderful, and I know you have mentoring programs here to take advantage of. The difference between a mentor and a sponsor is a mentor talks with you when a sponsor talks about you. Mentors give you perspective, sponsors give you opportunities, mentors help you skill up, sponsors help you move up. And so, whereas you can go ask someone to be your mentor, sponsorship is not typically something you ask for, it's more something you earn. And so it's about taking steps to build trust among your leaders so that they know you are someone who will deliver above and beyond what's asked of you, make your value visible, raise your hand for those stretch assignments, and know that if you share your career goals with your leaders, after showing the value of the work you can do, after really being a solid contributor, sometimes just that sponsor knowing what your goal is allows them to make the match to the high profile assignment or that next level promotion or the role that's ideal for you. So it's more of a process of showing your value and then sharing your goals over time.
Now that I had a moment to think about that. If you are given an opportunity to present. Don't back out. Don't say, I can't be ready. I'm not going to be ready. You'll probably be ready much more than anyone else. If you never get an opportunity to present, maybe ask your manager if you can. You're looking for opportunities. I think to get sponsors, you have to have some level of visibility, as Joe was talking about. And presentation is one way. Reaching out to people at a higher level and not thinking like, I can't talk to a VP. I come across that a lot. People are afraid of talking to their manager's manager. One thing about me is that I would reach out to Chuck if I have to, and I did, and he actually did come here once. So do whatever it takes to gain some visibility, and don't wait until you're perfectly ready for it. You never will be.
One more thing, if you want to really understand how sponsorship works, sponsor someone else, right? Speak up on behalf of someone, throw their name out for a big stretch assignment. So sponsor someone else, then you'll really get to know. All right, almost time to wrap up, isn't it? Do you have a final thought?
We have one more question, and then we will wrap up.
I'm Anna, and nice to hear you talk about so many wonderful things. And we would be taking so many things out from this session.
But my question is, we hear a lot about, risk taking, right? And then being a transformer, being a strategist. But at the same time, we talk about the balance too, right? We do not want to end up with an IV in the hospital bed, as you said, right? How do we strike that balance? When do we know that I have to take this up, I have to move forward, I have to grab this? And when do I think that, okay, this may be too much for me? How do we strike that balance? Thank you.
I heard this great phrase recently, the juggle is real. The juggle is real. We're all always juggling, and I have one tool that's worked for me. It's called the not to-do list. It's the opposite of a to-do list. It's where you make a list of things you give yourself permission to not have to do, right? 15 years ago, a friend and I made our not to-do lists, and I just put yoga on the list. I don't want to do yoga, and it's still on the list. It's going to stay on the list. One exec I interviewed, I asked her, what's on your not to-do list? And she said, I will not run or jog unless I am being chased. So give yourself permission to put things on the list at home, at work, any area of life where you give yourself permission to not have to do those things.
Unfortunately, we came to the end of our session. I want to thank Joe. I want to thank all of you, first of all, for being here, everyone online and in Mexico. And I'd like to ask Joe to wrap up the session for us.
All right, so for those of you who were fortunate enough to get the piece of paper under the chair with the book, I will be out here at a book signing table. You'll have my signature in the book, but if you have a minute to stay around, I can write your name and a personal message. We can get a photo together. I'll give you a bookmark and a sticker. So if you have time, I'd love for those of you with the book to stick around and I'll sign. And just one final closing thought to kind of wrap up. Look, if you want to leave a lasting leadership legacy that long outlives your lifetime, don't just be a leader. And don't just be a leader who develops other leaders. Be what I call an L to the power of 3. All right, what's an L to the power of 3? It's a leader who develops leaders who develop other leaders. Do you like that? Are you in? All right, if you're in, repeat after me. L, yes.
L, yes.
All right, once more with feeling. L, yes.
L, yes.
Thanks, everyone. It's been great working with you and with all of you today. Would you raise your right hand, drop it down behind your shoulders, you can just give yourself a pat on the back, and then give an elbow bump to the people that are sitting near you. Thanks, everyone.
Stop. Just end the stream.